half, and so you could have two half enormous bits of ice, or it can actually just peel off quite small bits, and they'll dissolve relatively quickly.
It'll be a spectacle, won't it?
Oh, totally. It's just awesome to see these things and to imagine what's going on underneath. We use autonomous underwater vehicles to look at how they melt so that we can understand how long they will last.
Fascinating, and thank you for joining us with that intel. That's Dr. Craig Stevens from NIWA. Before we go, I know that in our pre-panel correspondence today, both of you were a wee bit interested in this. A listener named Keith emailed, "We're not told to signal when going straight through a roundabout. I do so because people then know I'm not going to turn left. The no signalling rule, if you're not going to turn right, would make sense in an ideal world, but we can't trust the oncoming non-signaller not to turn across our bow." Do you agree?
I think Keith is a very wise man, because my partner always tells me off for signalling when going straight ahead and has claimed I'm the only person in New Zealand who does this. There's no need. But as Keith said, you never can quite trust the person coming into the roundabout, that they know if you're not indicating you're staying on the roundabout. So I think it's very sensible, and I'm glad there's at least two of us in New Zealand who do this.
Make that three.
Yes.
Yeah. I signal all the time. I am even more cautious. Even when I see other people signalling on roundabouts, I tend to take a double take and be very cautious, because I know New Zealanders are such great drivers, but they are somewhat, shall we say, relaxed with their signalling.
It's very generous of you.
We all are relatively relaxed in this country, aren't we? The rules are just guidelines and generally not mandatory. So I follow the rule that if the car or truck is generally bigger than me, then I tend to give way anyway.
Oh, okay. The rule of size that's mentioned in the road code. But the point, I mean, Keith isn't making this point, but there is a point in that roundabouts are supposed to be efficient and for clearing traffic. And roundabouts should be far more efficient than they are, would you agree? Because so many people hesitate at them.
Well, again, it's a question of whether you trust your fellow drivers on the road.
Yeah. There's a case that Bob Jones has actually made that you should never have traffic lights, because they can only slow traffic down. And if people never hesitated, then you'd actually have a case for not having traffic lights. But I think so roads and intersections are designed that people do hesitate.
All right, but I do think that roundabouts are far superior to traffic lights in general.
Yes.
If the roundabout is appropriate for that intersection.
It's been suggested on the panel before that there should be police blitzers at roundabouts. I don't think there's any official appetite for that.
Well, it would sort of block the roundabout for a start if you have a police car in the middle of it.
We have a bolt gun on our farm. People have got a lot to say about bolt guns today, and I won't be able to get the representative views assessed, but we've got a bolt gun on our farm. We use it to euthanize sick cows and calves. Sure. It is humane, quick. You don't need a firearms licence to use one. They are good at the job they do if used correctly, says Rebecca. So, one point of view about bolt guns, but there are others I won't get to. David Farrer, thank you very much for the panel. It's going to be an exciting week, gentlemen.
It will be indeed.
Ganesh Nana, thank you for coming on and come back again.
Thank you.
That's us, everybody. Appreciate your company. We are back tomorrow, and John Campbell is standing by now with Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, a really startling admission by the Southern DHB that men have had their lives shortened by, quote, unreasonable, end quote, delays to treatment. Dunedin man Stephen Hoffman is just one patient whose prostate cancer has spread after he waited 10 months for surgery. Stephen himself and the Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer are with us tonight. It is an extraordinary interview with Dr. Nigel Miller. Also tonight, hundreds of Waikato farmers gather in Morrinsville to protest against Labour's proposed water and pollution charges, the latest on the jet fuel crisis. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is live in the studio, and a memorial to a man killed by a foreign driver is under threat of removal. Well, because people just don't like it on the side of the road.
RNZ News at 5. No mai, haere mai. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. The Defence Force has been called out to help bring in supplies of petrol and diesel for Auckland after a ruptured pipeline disrupted the city's main supply. The Marsden Point pipeline to Whitty was shut down last week after being damaged by a digger. A fuel industry spokesperson, Andrew McNaught, says the disruption is unprecedented and the Auckland region only plans for a maximum 6 days of reserves. Up to 20 Defence Force drivers will help bring in tankers of fuel to petrol stations. A naval tanker will be used to move diesel from Marsden Point to other parts of the country. Meanwhile, Refining NZ, which owns the pipeline, says repairs to the damaged pipe means supply to jet fuel or of jet fuel won't reach Auckland Airport for at least 9 days. The Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says she's not surprised farmers in her hometown have taken a different view from her party's plans to clean up waterways. Hundreds of farmers and many National Party supporters turned out in Morrinsville to protest against taxes proposed by the Labour Party they believe unfairly target the rural sector. Labour is proposing to put a charge on irrigated water and bring agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. Ms Ardern says the water tax applies to those not already paying to use municipal water supplies. She says Morrinsville is where she grew up and she is well aware of differing political viewpoints.
That still continues. That doesn't surprise me, but I also know I do have some hometown support too. My ultimate goal is, as Prime Minister, though, to unite us behind the cause of making sure that our rivers are clean.
Jacinda Ardern there. The New Zealand First Leader was booed when he addressed farmers at the rowdy protest in Morrinsville this afternoon. Winston Peters was shouted down when he tried to raise what he says are the National Party's plans to also charge for water. Afterwards, Mr Peters said the farmers weren't serious.
This is a protest about farming survival, about sustainability, about the fact that they're the key tool in the box to clean our country up. All together, that is. Bearing in mind that Cox Creek in Auckland is 4,000 times worse than the Waikato River, and I thought it was a terribly wasted opportunity.
Winston Peters. The Southern District Health Board has apologised to men diagnosed with prostate cancer who had their cancer spread while waiting for surgery. A Dunedin man, Stephen Hoffman, says he's now incontinent and undergoing daily radiotherapy after the cancer spread while he waited 10 months for urgent surgery. The DHB's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr Nigel Miller, says he's sorry about Mr Hoffman's situation and confirmed at least 6 men have had their lives shortened by delays in urgent treatment. Last week, the board committed to clear the backlog of patients in the Urology department, hiring extra nurses and bringing in locum consultants. You can hear Dr Miller shortly on Checkpoint. South Island's Lewis Pass has been closed due to snow, cutting off the main route between Christchurch and Picton. Lewis Pass is now part of the South Island's main traffic corridor after last November's 7.8 magnitude Kaikoura earthquake devastated State Highway 1. The Transport Agency says part of State Highway 7 along Lewis Pass is now closed between Hamner Springs Turnoff and Springs Junction. The only way to travel from Christchurch and Picton while Lewis Pass is closed is along the South Island's west coast. Half a dozen roads in Dunedin's Tairi area have been closed by flooding. More than 80 millimetres of rain has fallen on Swampy Spur in the last 24 hours. That's caused streams and rivers in the Strath, Tairi and Mosgiel areas to rise rapidly. East Tairi School has closed for the day as a precaution. Residents in the British Virgin Islands are facing a new hurricane threat just days after many lost their homes and livelihoods to Hurricane Irma. Forecasters say Tropical Storm Maria has now reached hurricane strength in the eastern Caribbean and looks set to take a similar course across the region as Irma did last week. The BBC's Jeremy Cook reports from Totola in the British Virgin Islands.
For families who've lost everything to Irma, there is new misery to contend with. A series of tropical rainstorms are passing through the British Virgin Islands, and with so many still waiting for tarpaulins to replace roofs lost in the hurricane, it is a bitter blow. Local coordinators have told us that no one here is now going hungry. But the challenges facing these communities remain huge. Homes and businesses are destroyed, hundreds of luxury yachts, the backbone of the crucial tourist industry, are sunk or ruined. And the governor here is now warning people to prepare for a new, powerful storm heading this way.
Jeremy Cook in Tortola. The dystopian drama The Handmaid's Tale has scooped 3 of the major prizes at this year's Emmy Awards in Los Angeles. The show won Best Drama Series, Best Director and Best Actress for Elizabeth Moss. Julia Louis-Dreyfus won Best Actress in a Comedy Series for Veep, breaking the record for the most Emmys won by a lead actor for the same role. Veep was also named Best Comedy Series. It's exactly 5 minutes past 5. To sport now, the New Zealand motor racing driver Scott Dixon has had to settle for third in the IndyCar Championship after finishing fourth in the final race of the season in California. American Joseph Newgarden finished second to win the championship, with Frenchman Simon Pagenaud winning in the Sonoma race and finishing second overall. Despite winning just one race all year, Scott Dixon managed to keep his quest for a fifth overall title alive. However, he'll look back on 2017 as a season of missed opportunities.
We had good speed, but just, we should have won quite a few races and didn't. We, got crashed out of a few as well, and those are all valuable points. So, you can look back and blame it on, 10 different things.
Scott Dixon there. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says the idea behind leaving several leading players out of the trip to Argentina is to avoid jet lag. Sam Whitelock, Brodie Retallick, Liam Squire, Sam Cane, Bowden Barrett and Ryan Crotty will stay home next week before joining up with the squad in Cape Town for the final match of the Rugby Championship against South Africa. Hansen says the trip to Argentina, then on to South Africa, took a toll on players last year.
We're just trying to think outside the box, so if you keep doing what you always do, you get what you always get. So it puts a lot of pressure on us going to Argentina because they're a good side and we need to play well to perform there. But we're confident in the group we're taking there that should be able to do the job.
Loose forwards Jerome Kano and Matt Todd and lock Patrick Tuipulotu return to the side for the trip in Buenos Aires. That's the news.
Hello, I'm John Campbell.
And I'm Guyan Espiner. Radio New Zealand has been delivering election results for decades, the first Kiwi broadcaster to do so.
And this year we're taking it to a whole new level.
We'll be available on 7 media platforms.
You can catch us on RNZ National, RNZ's website, rnz.co.nz, and through the Morning Report and Checkpoint Facebook pages and YouTube.
And yes, we are on the telly on Freeview Channel 50 and Face TV on Sky Channel 83.
Our team of top political reporters will be broadcasting from right around the country.
And from the University of Auckland's television studio, I'll be joined by a heavyweight team of political exponents and expert observers to dissect the results and call the shots.
It's game on, so bring it in close. We're on the radio and the website.
On the Morning Report and Checkpoint Facebook pages and on YouTube.
For Election 17, join us at 5 to 7 this coming Saturday night here on RNZ National.
And on the telly.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now, taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Tuesday, from our Met service. Northland to Horowhenua, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy and thundery with hail. That should clear up tomorrow morning. However, isolated thunderstorms and hail return south of Auckland for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers, possibly thundery with hail in Hawke's Bay, turning to rain in Gisborne tomorrow. Long fine spells and a few showers for Kapiti, Wellington and Wairarapa. Nelson and Marlborough, that's away from Kaikoura Coast. Rain should clear up this evening, a few showers tomorrow, possible thunderstorms and hail in the afternoon tomorrow. Kaikoura Coast, Canterbury, North Otago, Dunedin and Clutha, rain, heavy falls about the ranges, easing in Otago before the end of today and elsewhere tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers today, fine tomorrow. Central Otago and Southland, patchy rain or drizzle. That should clear up tonight. Morning low cloud or fog tomorrow, then fine. At the Chathams, periods of rain. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up on the program, the latest on that fuel pipe. We're in Morrinsville with the farmers and Winston Peters joins us live. But we begin tonight with an extraordinary figure out of the Southern DHB about the impact of treatment delays at Dunedin Hospital to men with prostate cancer. In an interview recorded by Checkpoint just over an hour ago, the Chief Medical Officer of Health at the Southern DHB, Dr. Nigel Miller, told us he fears delays in treatment have led to the lives of more than 6 men being shortened. More than 6 men. This is a striking admission from the DHB of lives being shortened as a direct result of unreasonable treatment delays. You'll hear that interview in a moment. Checkpoint has followed treatment delays in the Urology department since the beginning of August. Then, on August 17th, a review into the Urology department at Dunedin Hospital confirmed a significant level of clinical risk amongst long-waiting patients. Tonight, we speak to one of those men. And as a result of that interview, we went to the DHB and got the admission of numbers you are about to hear. But we do begin with Stephen Hoffman, 62 years old. He had prostate cancer. It has spread, and in doing so, it is likely to significantly shorten his life. His GP referred him to Dunedin Hospital in September of last year. He had classic symptoms presenting very obviously, and a history in his family of the cancer. So when did he get surgery?
On the 6th of the 7th, 10 months later.
10 months later, and I'm looking at the notes, the letter from your radiation oncologist, which says when you were referred, you had a high suspicion of cancer, an abnormal DRE, progressive urinary dysfunction, a family history of prostate cancer. There were so many signs, weren't there, in your very first referral?
Yep, the referral basically said it was enlarged prostate, suspected cancer with a urgent referral.
Yes, once again, your patient notes, his referral was graded as a 3 with a wait time of 6 weeks. In the end, you waited 10 months for surgery.
Yep. And that's basically, if I'd have seen them straight away when I should have been and had the operation within 2 months, that means that it wouldn't have been sitting there in me for another 8 months to turn into a ruddy great tumour and basically shorten my life.
Forgive me for asking what is a pretty blunt question, but what's your prognosis, Steve?
5 years came up in amongst the conversation.
And what is your quality of life? Do you have a degree of incontinence?
Full on. Yeah.
The review into urology at Southern DHB was made public on August the 17th. That's the same day as your letter. Checkpoint has been covering pressures at the DHB, as you know, Steve. We covered it at length prior to the review being released, particularly in urology. But when that review came out, that was all made official. Now, one of the review's key observations was, and I quote, there is a significant level of clinical risk within the long-waiting patients at the Dunedin site. And as we know, you waited 10 months between referral and surgery. Now, if you don't mind, we're going to play you a piece of the interview with the Southern DHB CEO, Chris Fleming, that we did on the night the report came out. We were speaking about that clinical risk.
Any delays can create problems in terms of ongoing care.
Did they? Did those delays create problems in terms of ongoing care in some cases?
Look, what I'm told is where a patient with a malignant condition such as prostate cancer has delays in making diagnosis and in reaching definitive treatment, there is undoubtedly a risk of progression of the cancer. This may not present initially, and it may be some time later that's understood, perhaps years after the treatment.
So has this put patient well-being, health, at risk?
It does put patient health and well-being at risk, and we just need to do much better.
You do?
Yes.
It says, key observations, number 2, there is a significant level of clinical risk within the long-waiting patients at the Dunedin site. Is that good enough?
No, it's not good enough, and do I agree with it? Yes, I do.
So, Steve, we're back with you now. That's Chris Fleming, the CEO of the Southern DHB, saying you were exposed to an unacceptable level of clinical risk because of the delay. He really is talking about you, some other men too, but this is your case. How do you feel about this?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm pretty pissed off that they didn't see me sooner. It's aggressive cancer I've got inside me. If I'd have been seen in the correct amount of time, within 6 weeks, the specialist initially, they would have been able to put the flags up and get into me and get it done. But that never happened. It just should have been dealt with bloody earlier, right at the start, when the flag was up on the referral from my GP.
In September?
In September, and I never seen that specialist till the 20th of February,
and
5.5 months later.
The specialist noted you had a rock-hard prostate consistent with the prostate cancer. He noted that you were in urinary retention. It was known that you had a family history of prostate cancer, but you still didn't get surgery until July.
Yeah. So,
have you received an apology?
No, I haven't. I'm not that bloody worried about I mean, basically what I'm doing here at the moment is I'm trying to get the cause to get them funding. The nurses and doctors in that hospital are bloody great. They've got nothing to work with. They need more funding, and it's just, yeah, that's what it's about. And I just don't want it to happen to anyone else. That's the initial stages of what I'm on about. I don't want to be angry about it because I have to keep myself right to let me try and heal up as best I can. So I try and keep a pretty good frame of mind about the whole thing rather than get all bloody bitter and twisted about it, if you know what I mean, yeah.
Stephen Hoffman. Dr. Nigel Miller is Chief Medical Officer of Health at the Southern DHB. Now, in this interview, he tells us how many men he believes are in a similar position to Steve Hoffman. That is, their lives have probably been shortened as a result of delays to their treatment. But we begin with Steve himself. Was his treatment good enough?
I don't believe it has been. I believe his care has been unreasonably delayed in our system, which I think is, really poor and something we deeply regret.
What has been the impact of that regretful delay on his health?
I understand from the clinical team caring for him that this delays in treatment of this sort is likely to affect prognosis.
And his prognosis is now that his life is considerably shorter than it might otherwise have been.
I don't really want to detail his case over the radio.
Why not? Because he's detailed his case over the radio with us. Is it very convenient for you not to have to confront the issue that as a result of the delay to his treatment?
I'm sorry, John, I wasn't aware that he had detailed his case, and of course I'll take your word for that. You're absolutely right that we are really concerned by the fact that the treatment's delayed, and that sort of thing, delaying your treatment in this circumstance is likely to have an adverse effect on prognosis.
Where does the buck stop for that? Because this is a man who is 62 years old, who was working, who has lost his income, who is incontinent, who now has a shorter life expectancy, who has had a truly miserable time. And his treatment, he was referred by his GP. 10 months later, he finally got treatment. There were so many signs, so many indicators that this man was seriously ill. Where does the buck stop for that?
Well, from my perspective, it stops with the District Health Board and me. I'm the Chief Medical Officer, so I'm responsible for that. I think he may wish to have this formally investigated by the Health and Disability Commissioner, which would be quite a reasonable thing and something I would not want to dissuade him from at all.
Sorry to interrupt there. We've looked at this before. If it is investigated by the Health and Disability Commissioner, can compensation be recommended?
Technically, the way matters go, if and I don't.
The answer is no, isn't it? The answer is no. The Health and Disability Commissioner does not have the power to recommend compensation. In other words,
sorry, John. I was about to explain that in fact the Health and Disability Commissioner can make referrals to the Human Rights Commission, where there can be discussions around exemplary damages. That's my understanding. Although I don't believe that's a very common thing at all.
It's not, and that would be the Human Rights Commission making those recommendations around exemplary
that's correct, John.
No, it's not the Health and Disability Commissioner. In other words, where is the buck going to stop at the Southern DHB?
As I said, I'm the responsible senior clinician, so it stops with me. And it's the responsibility of the organisation to make sure that these sorts of things do not happen, that we have good processes and systems of care, and I think in this regard we have severely let Mr. Hoffman down.
How many other people have you severely let down, do you think, in the urology department?
I don't think I can give you a number, but the concerns about this sort of thing is one of the reasons we wanted to have the review, and the review has given us clear evidence of problems in the service through the resourcing and the way things were coordinated or not coordinated.
Not coordinated, yes, that's a nice piece of semantics, and that's the case, isn't it?
I've been totally frank and open with you, John. This is something that really concerns me. Hence the review.
Look, sorry, I know, and you're here, and we really appreciate it. I'll be totally frank and open with you. Concern is all very well, but if you are dying earlier than you might otherwise die, if you had gone to the public hospital in Dunedin with a reasonable expectation that given that there was a history of prostate cancer in your family, given that you had urinary retention, given that you had a rock-hard prostate, given that you had progressive urinary dysfunction, sorry, that's the same thing again, bladder discomfort, you might have received treatment faster than 10 months later.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think the fact that it's been delayed so long is something that's unacceptable, and we sincerely regret. Sadly, I don't know what I can do to turn that back, except to make sure that now we know about this, we can make sure he gets the best possible care. And we've got the team going through all of the cases in the process to make sure that we're not delaying anyone anymore.
I really appreciate you fronting, and I'm listening to you, and it all sounds right. But this man is seriously unwell. And I'm not a big fan of journalists saying, are you going to resign? I've spent my entire career not asking that question because I think it's glib and it's facile, and actually, usually there are some mitigating factors or some human dimension. But here, the hospital has let this man down so badly, and it seems on the face of it other men down so badly, that I just wonder what has to happen before someone there says, hey, mea culpa, this simply wasn't good enough. I'm going to show you how much this means. I am going to resign.
Yeah, and that's, John, I understand what you're saying. From my perspective, I would resign if I thought it was going to make a difference. If I thought, if I resign, is this going to make things work better and faster and help sort out this type of problem? That's the best I can say, really, John. This really saddens me and makes me feel sick that I am part of the care of a man who's ended up in this situation.
Is there a case for ACC support here? I have a letter from his radiation oncologist saying for the delay in diagnosis, the fact that he had such a high-grade cancer, level 1 evidence to show these tumours progress rapidly if not treated, there is a serious case for this being accident compensation territory.
I think his clinician puts it very well. I agree entirely.
So you support him in that?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't make that decision for ACC. They have to make it, but I think that's been presented very accurately. It's the technical term is treatment injury, which would include significant departures from what is expected timeframes of treatment. In my view, the ACC, of course, has to make a determination.
So the technical term is treatment injury, which is an absolute admission of responsibility by the hospital, isn't it? Because you were doing the treatment.
Yeah, I think we've discussed that already. Okay, absolutely, okay. We are responsible. Yeah.
How many men in the urology department have suffered a similar kind of treatment injury, do you believe?
I don't think I can give you a figure on that. I think it would be inappropriate for me to guess. I'm concerned that there has been significant delays for patients. So at the moment, the first action has to be to go through all the cases and... When you say all the cases, how many are you talking about? More than 6? I'm talking about all the people currently in the process of going through assessment, treatment, surgery, etc., which is what has been happening, which the hospital team have been sitting down with the clinicians and going through them to find out who else could be suffering significant delays and what needs to be done to speed up treatment and assessment for patients.
Do you think there are more than 6 patients? Because that's the number we were looking at who had what seemed on the face of it to be really problematic delays. Do you think it is that number? More? What are we talking about?
I think it's very likely there's more.
More than 6?
That's why I feel so, disappointed that we find ourselves in this situation.
More than 6 men who have suffered such delays to their prostate cancer treatment that their life expectancy may be imperiled as a result of it?
There may well be. I can't give you a definite figure, but that's my fear.
Dr. Nigel Miller, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Health at the Southern DHB. More than 6 men. The Southern DHB CEO, Chris Fleming, has confirmed to us there are 6 men in Steve's situation that he knows of. He says there may be many more they don't yet know about. Of the 100 urgent prostate biopsies the DHB is committed to, Mr Fleming says it expects 25% of those will have a very poor prognosis, meaning their lives may be significantly shortened because of the delays in treatment. So 6 plus a possible 25% more. We invited the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, on the program tonight. He declined, but in a statement said, "My sympathies are entirely with the patient and his family. This tragic case illustrates why action has been needed to ensure the Urology Department at Southern DHB changes the way it operates. This is the human face of the issues highlighted in the independent review of Southern DHB's Urology Service." We'd really like your feedback on this, particularly if you're in the Dunedin area. You can text us 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and you can email us, of course, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Winston Peters is waiting outside to talk to us after the headlines, and we will discuss with him what he makes of all of this. A Navy tanker and Defence Force divers are being brought in to help tackle the fuel crisis that has grounded thousands of airline passengers. The only jet fuel supply pipeline to Auckland Airport has been shut down after it was ruptured by a digger on a farm in Northland, causing it to leak up to 80,000 litres of oil. The fuel industry says it hasn't seen anything like it before and is warning that Auckland may not have enough petrol and diesel stocks to cope with the unprecedented disruption. Laura Tupou reports.
Refining NZ staff have been working round the clock to clean up the 2 tanker loads of jet fuel that leaked from the pipeline at Ruakaka last Thursday. It says it stopped the oil going into waterways and moved contaminated soil to the Marsden Point refinery. Engineers are urgently working to fix the pipeline, which supplies jet fuel, petrol and diesel to Auckland, but supply won't be restored for at least 9 days. A spokesperson for the petrol companies, Andrew McNaught, says the Auckland region has a maximum 6 days of reserves.
This is a significant supply disruption that we haven't seen in 32 years. It's unprecedented. The system is built to be able to take small disruptions, but it's not built to take significant ones.
Andrew McNaught says airlines flying to Auckland have to refuel at Wellington or Christchurch instead, or internationally.
There's good supply at Wellington Airport. There is good supply at Christchurch. We've got a import vessel coming into New Zealand in the next couple of days, which will be discharging jet fuel into the Littleton terminal in Christchurch.
The Energy and Resources Minister, Judith Collins, this afternoon announced that the naval tanker HMNZS Endeavour will be used to move diesel fuel from Marsden Point to other parts of the country. Up to 20 Defence Force tanker drivers will also help local operators. The Defence Force has cancelled a major exercise with Singapore to save fuel, put off some training, and is also looking at refuelling smaller commuter aircraft at Whenuapai Air Force Base. There was little consolation for passengers affected by the cancellation of dozens of flights at Auckland Airport.
I think the flight's usually 3.5, but it's 5.5 now, so an extra 2 hours. It is annoying. You'd think they would have something in place in case things like this happen.
It's silly that there's only one pipeline coming into the New Zealand airport, Auckland Airport, for flights. It's ridiculous.
We have scheduled all our programs. School is reopening on 20th and we'll be missing 1 day. It's frustrating.
Air New Zealand says it's extremely disappointed by the incident, which will affect 2,000 of its customers today. The head of the board of the Airline Representatives Association, Justin Tyumbers, says airlines are trying to ensure disruptions are minimal, but they have a few options up their sleeves.
Bring in more fuel from overseas on their inbound flights, so sort of managing their own fuel supply, if you like. The other option they've got is the longer haul operators in the Middle East and China is to stop for a fuel stop in Australia en route. Other options are some of the airlines are looking at bringing in larger aircraft so that they can carry more fuel into the country but also take more passengers in and out as well.
Air New Zealand and Jetstar have cancelled dozens of flights so far and warn of more to come. Refining NZ, which owns the pipeline, says the fuel leak will cost it up to $15 million in lost revenue. Mō te hotaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou aho.
Hundreds of farmers and their supporters vented their displeasure today at politicians and in particular the Labour and Green parties at a protest in Jacinda Ardern's hometown of Morrinsville. It was billed as a chance to back a rural sector sick and tired of being the scapegoat for environmental issues. Our Waikato reporter Andrew McRae was there.
First of all, I'd just like to ask everyone, where are they from? Who's from the Greater Waikato?
Who's from Auckland? Me. Who's from Northland? Taranaki. Any further than Taranaki? Hawke's Bay. Hawke's Bay. Hawke's Bay.
About 500 farmers and locals turned out in Morrinsville to show their support. Well, not strictly a political rally, the number of national and New Zealand first signs and lack of anything red or green put paid to that theory. One of the organisers, veteran dairy farmer Lloyd Downing, didn't dispute that Labor was the target.
Because it's probably going to be a Labor-Greens alliance, isn't it? And I mean, if we try and farm underneath that sort of politics is going to be extremely difficult.
Lloyd Downing says the protesters' message to politicians is clear.
Well, I would just like to think that there's a bit of solidarity in the rural community, and to the MPs, just leave us alone. You know, and we will sort the problem out. And as I said, by the time, if they tax us, we need a carrot, not a stick.
Dairy farmer Jim Cotman reckons political parties see the rural sector as an easy target, believing their votes don't count.
But what they need to consider is what the effect is on all the rest of the rural communities. All the extra taxes that are coming, emissions, water tax, the whole 9 yards, we're all going to get copped one way or another, and there's less money available.
Horticulturalist Jeff Harper came over from the Bay of Plenty for the rally to show solidarity with the farming community.
I think that the Labor policies in terms of the carbon tax and the water tax could make farming in this country uneconomic.
Other farmers who braved the wet and cool conditions were in no doubt why they were there.
Oh, I've heard because Jacinda's lost the plot. She says this is her hometown. Well, she's kicking her hometown in the guts as far as we're concerned. Won't be here if she has her way.
A tax on water for farmers is effectively a tax on the ability to earn overseas funds.
The cities and the country are dividing, and it concerns me. I think that we need each other.
The fact the election is only 5 days away wasn't lost on New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters. He spoke at the end of the rally, but found it hard going as someone decided to start up Myrtle, an old Massey Ferguson tractor made famous when National MP Shane Ardern tried to drive it up the steps of Parliament during a farmers' protest in 2003.
Can you tell that farmer to turn that tractor off? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a political rally. This is about New Zealand farming. I want to tell you, as clear as my bullets day.
Dairy farmer Scott Smythe got into a heated discussion with Mr Peters.
Yeah, I would honestly like to hear what you would do if you went in with Labor.
If you wanted to hear, why were you talking?
Because everyone else was talking, and I just say get on with it and just say what you're going to do. Well, don't you want to say?
What do you mean what I'm doing?
If you go in with Labor, what will you do for rural New Zealand in regards to all these taxes?
I'm here to tell you that the two-old party's going to rip you off on water charges. And you think it's Labor, don't you? And Nationals is bad.
National leader Bill English stayed away from the protest, but when asked, was happy to point the finger at Labor and the Greens.
The real problem here is Labor and the Greens have targeted the rural community because they believe there's urban votes in it. We work with them, and in the future we'll be working with urban communities because the water quality issues in our urban areas are going to be challenging. That's how you make progress. You make progress by working with people, not adopting divisive politics.
But Labor leader Jacinda Ardern denied there was any sort of rural-urban divide.
The fact that I know that there are plenty of farmers who are environmentalists and want to see us clean up our rivers. And that is why we've announced our plan. It is ultimately about making sure our rivers are swimmable again.
Standing a little way off from the protest rally, in fact across the road and down a bit, were about 8 people protesting water pollution, with a banner saying, "Love farming, hate pollution." One of them, Angus Robson, says they didn't join the main protest because they didn't want to confront farmers. The main protest rally dispersed pretty quickly as the rain started to fall again, and the irony of having too much water wasn't lost on those there. In Morrinsville for Checkpoint, Corps Andrew McRae-Tierney.
26 to 6 coming up on the program. More on the situation at the Southern DHB, where at least 6 men have had their prostate cancer spread whilst waiting for surgery. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is going to join us live here in the studio. But before all of that, Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, John. In our headlines, the Defence Force has been called out to help bring in supplies of petrol and diesel for Auckland after a ruptured pipeline disrupted the city's main supply. A fuel industry spokesperson says the disruption is unprecedented and the Auckland region only plans for a maximum 6 days of reserves. Up to 20 Defence Force drivers will be helping to bring the tankers of fuel to petrol stations there, and a naval tanker will be used to move diesel from Marsden Point to other parts of the country. The Southern District Health Board has apologised to men diagnosed with prostate cancer who had their cancer spread while waiting for surgery. A Dunedin man, Stephen Hoffman, says he's now incontinent and undergoing daily radiotherapy after the cancer spread while he waited 10 months for urgent surgery. The DHB's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr Nigel Miller, told Checkpoint it has severely let Mr Hoffman down. He also confirmed at least 6 men have had their lives shortened by delays in urgent treatment. The Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern, says she's not surprised farmers in her hometown have taken a different view of her party's plans to clean up waterways. Hundreds of farmers and many National Party supporters turned out in Morrinsville to protest against taxes proposed by the Labour Party they believe unfairly target the rural sector. Residents in the British Virgin Islands are facing a new hurricane threat just days after many lost their homes and livelihoods to Hurricane Irma. Forecasters say Tropical Storm Maria has now reached hurricane strength in the Eastern Caribbean and looks set to take a similar course across the region as Irma did last week. And half a dozen roads in Dunedin's Taieri area have been closed by flooding. More than 80 millimetres of rain has fallen on Swampy Spur in the last 24 hours, and snow has closed the Lewis Pass, cutting off the main route between Christchurch and Picton. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport will be at 6.
Winston Peters next. It's into business news now with Giles Beckford. New figures show a bounce back for the service sector, which points to an economy still ticking over nicely, Giles.
Indeed. Good evening to you, John. Yes, it's the services sector, shops, pubs, restaurants, real estate agents, insurance sales, you name it. It had a bit of a soft midwinter patch, a bit like the manufacturing sector, but the rain stopped. The activity has improved, particularly in new sales and new orders, which is a good pointer for the future. Add that to the bounce back that we saw in the manufacturing survey last week, and it would suggest the economy growing at 3% or more. Now, we'll get a good look on, in fact, how the economy has been faring in the first half of the year. We have growth numbers out on Thursday. That's the gross domestic product for the 3 months ended June. We had a soft start to the year. The expectation is that it'll have been a bit better in the second quarter. Annual growth rate expected to be somewhere around 2.5%, perhaps to 3%, probably around the bottom end of that range. In the context of the election campaign, of course, there's not going to be really too much on either side for people to try and make any capital out of, although I don't think that will necessarily stop them trying.
No, I suspect not. Thanks, Giles. What happened on the markets today?
Very quickly, our top 50 index for shares down just 4.7759 to close. Just note those companies involved in the fuel problem. In New Zealand, down 3 cents, that's about 1%. New Zealand refining down 3.5%, but Z Energy and Auckland Airport just up a shade. Our own New Zealand dollar trading at 73.1 US cents and 91.1 Australian. That's business for now, John.
Giles Beckford, thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate it. Giles Beckford, our business editor, rushing through it tonight because we have a special guest in the studio. Winston Peters sitting beside me laughing, and I haven't even said anything funny yet. Nice to have you here, Mr. Peters.
It's good to be here.
How's the campaign trail going? How was your day today?
Very fascinating day.
You got booed in Morrinsville, didn't you?
Well, I got cheered as well. I mean, that's in the article. If you go and see it on live, and I got it on my Facebook, it's getting thousands of people looking at it. But the reality is I went to a protest which was thoroughly depoliticised for a purpose, just to blame the Labour Party and the Greens. And I went down and say, hang on, you guys, you've got a massive charge being secretly applied by December of this year by the National Party.
What is it? What is that massive charge?
Well, it's an arrangement that Mr Finlayson has been, and with the National Party and other senior ministers, entering into the charging of water by Maori in equal control and authority, with all the documentation I put out today, with equal control and authority with the local council, and no one's telling anybody about that.
No, that's not going to directly impact on farmers, is it?
Oh, yes, it is.
Fiscally. How much? How much will it cost them?
Well, that's my point. How much does this all mean to the farmer or the commercial user of water in New Zealand? Because on Lake Taupo, it's costing each user $25 just to get an annual licence.
So if you're the white knight turning up to save them from the predations of Māori and Christopher Finlayson, why did they boo you?
No, because you've got a number of National Party people who are so obsessed with the Labour Party and the Greens, and quite rightly so on this question. They're blinded to the fact their own party is going to and has already entered these arrangements. And it's out there. I'm putting it out there because 5 days out from the election, The farming community don't know just what they're in for.
No, they don't know what they're in for. And does New Zealand First know what they're in for? Let's go back to your media release of 10th of August. Labour's water tax means $18 cabbages. Do you stand by that?
Well, that's what the market...
If you give me a straight answer, if you say that was complete utter bollocks, I got that wrong, we'll move on.
Well, guess where I got it from? Say it's bollocks. I got it from the market gardeners.
Right.
They might know a bit about costings.
Yeah, but no, they didn't know about Labour's water.
Let me tell you something. It depends on the water charge. Now, Labor went from 1 cent to 2 cents.
Okay.
That's a 100% increase.
But at 1
and then 500 million.
Yeah, but 1 or 2 cents, even the 100% increase, even if we go from 1 to 2, you don't get $18
But
a
stop there. 1 cent, 2 cents, or 500 million, or, as Jacinda Ardern said, we'll settle it with the stakeholders after the election. So it could be high, but you don't know, do you?
Read that headline out to me.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds
$18
extravagant, but that's where we got it from. 3 market gardeners said what we're hearing means that. And, of course, Labour Party's changed its policy 4 times. You know that.
Isn't this what you do? I mean, someone said to me over the weekend, I really like...
I'm a marvellous journalist, wasn't I? I report the facts. I just report the facts.
You don't. Only if the facts are fluid and suit you.
Well, at that time, no one knew what the charges were, and people were doing the calculations.
But if they didn't know, they weren't facts.
No, sorry, with what they did know. Because you remember, the Labour Party went from 1 cent to 2 cents to 500 million for the year. That's what that's what David Parker said. And then you had Jacinda saying, but we'll sort it out after the election. So you don't know what it is, do you? Now, none of us knows.
I want to put this to you. Somebody spoke to me over the weekend. They said, I really like Winston Peters. He keeps the bastards honest. Do you like that description of you, keeping the bastards honest?
That must be the most difficult job that's possibly in politics.
Yeah. Except
but over the years
doesn't that speak to your brilliance as an opposition politician? For example, Labour's water tax means $18 cabbages. You knew it didn't mean $18 cabbages. No. And I'd like to move on from that specific example.
3 market gardeners thought so I thought maybe they know more about production and cost of vegetables than you and I.
3 market gardeners.
Yes.
But isn't that your brilliance? Aren't you the guy who just whacks things up there? $18 cabbages, Māori destroying, isn't that what you do? And doesn't
Can I give you a recap quickly? Maori loans affair, right? The BNZ scandal, the wine box scandal, the Fuji Xerox, the most recent one, a 500 million blowout. I'm being ignored for a whole year, alerting my country, and over comes the head of Fuji Xerox Japan and apologises to all the people of New Zealand. Whose story is he backing up? Mine. I do my homework. That's why I do keep the system honest. I go to the wire when I do the right research. And the 3 market gardeners say that on day 1.
3 market gardeners?
Yes, that's what I said at the time.
Doesn't that make you a great opposition politician? And
well, I'll tell you what, if you're no good at opposition, you're going to be no good in government. Right. I'll tell you why, because you're not going to ask civil servants the question you have to ask. And what will happen is the bureaucracy will run rings around you, which is what I see all the time. And I see the internationalists. I see some of our people going to trade and deal with the Chinese and with the Koreans. They run rings around them. We come back and we end up with a free trade deal, 173% tariffs from Korea. And that's why I say, to be good in government, you've got to be good in opposition as well.
You put out a strange media release on Friday night. I just lost it, and I want to find it because I was sitting on it.
Name what it's about, and I'll tell you what it's about.
OK, here it is. Filthy rumour, dirty campaign. Can I read it out? I was approached by a senior journalist this afternoon. I was sitting in the Checkpoint studio on Friday night, and I thought, what the hell is this about? I was approached by a senior journalist this afternoon whose opening question was, how is your health? I made it very clear to him that if he or any other party thinks that spreading malicious rumours will not be met with the full force of the law available to me, then he and they would be very much mistaken. What the hell is that media release about? Don't give me your come hither smile. What's this about?
It's about a dirty campaign to take Winston Peters out of the selection with vicious rumours, and I decided...
What are the vicious rumours?
Well, I'm not going to tell you that because I just compound the sin that they are going to be guilty of if they repeat it. You know how defamation law works. You defame somebody and you help spread the defamation, then the damage is mitigated. Now, I'm not going to give you a legal answer here, but when I see filth and dirt, and I'm forewarned of it, I was forewarned of this.
Were you forewarned
about
what?
This? Yes, about these people are going to start taking on issues to do with your health. And I thought, oh, no, you don't.
Who are these people?
They're people who are so bereft of answers to my campaign and my policies that dirt is what they specialise in, and we all know it. And I tell you what, some of your colleagues in the media know about it. So it's no surprise to them, but I thought, I'm not going to take this.
Are they the same people responsible for leaking your superannuation information?
Funny enough, the people who are informing me from within a certain party that this is coming were the same people who think that this is wrong, it's dirty, they don't want the National Party to be associated with it. That's where it comes from.
So it's the National Party?
It's been picked up by other parties.
It's the National Party?
Sadly it is, yeah, sad to say. But I'm bound to defend those who have got a sense of character and decency, who say this is wrong.
Do you think that you, sorry, not you, do you think that New Zealand First voters will put you in the position on Saturday night of determining who is the next Prime Minister of New Zealand?
Not me, no. Look, not me. I have colleagues, I have a full board. We're a party with thousands of members. Can I just say, I wish I could answer your question. Honestly, I wish I could answer your question because I've had it asked probably 1,000 times in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
But
3 years ago, and 3 years before that, I remember 1996.
Well, you know,
I remember
24
Jim Bolger in the Beehive, Helen Clark in Bowen House.
Here comes Winston.
You went back and forward across the travelator.
Well, I've had 24
looking
years.
like the Beatles, so many people were following you as you were called.
Well, it's a sad thing, but the reality of the matter is that, look, the things are changing so fast, and I can tell you privately things that I seriously suspect that might blow in the next few days that will change the way people vote. We all need to know what those are. And they are, some of them are filthy, some of them are nasty, and if somebody blows them with facts, then they will change the next election.
I'm a bit confused, though. If MMP is Cuisinart odds, you know MMP, my goodness, you've made MMP work for you. If MMP is getting the biggest stack, why on earth would the Nats defame you when, in fact, they may need you to remain in government?
Because they'd rather deal with compliant puppets like the Maori Party, the United Party, and the ACT Party, for whom they have had fundraising for all three parties separately. I mean, the Maori Party had fundraising dinners at the Northern Club, the citadel of Maoridom, as you well know, where there was $10,000 plate dinners, organised by the National Party. You know, that's a jack-up, right?
How many MPs is ACT going to have?
ACT?
Yeah.
They're lucky they get one. They'll probably get one.
So Davidson was going to win Epsom. Do you reckon you can bring anyone else in, get 1.2 and a bit percent?
Well, whatever it is an absolute shell of its former self.
How many MPs?
United Party's gone, as you know.
Yeah, I do know. How many MPs is the Māori Party going to have?
Well, they probably get Jimbo and Turo these days.
And Waiariki?
I think he'll get in, but you can't.
Ho-Order, Howie Tamati in Tariana Turi's old seat?
No, I don't think so, no.
Oh, OK, so you're thinking one or two there.
Well,
in other words...
Can I tell you the tragedy is that the Maori Party terribly abused the Kingitanga or the King movement in this campaign, to the great shame, I think, and that's going to set things back for decades. It's very sad to see that, but, you know, that's what they've done. That's how desperate they have been.
So National are going to have to do incredibly well, given the small number of seats that
and
you
that's why we should. That's why they wish to take Winston Peters out. But, of course, they'll be the first ones on the phone on election night if they haven't been successful.
Will you answer it?
It's not for me to answer.
Oh, yes, it is. Who are you talking about?
Well, because I'll be so busy talking to you.
Right. I look forward to that. You were sitting outside when we had that story about the Southern DHB and men with prostate cancer who had such delays to their treatment that it is actually going to shorten their lives. Doesn't that speak to something very seriously wrong in our health system?
It speaks to something worse than that. It speaks to the lack of integrity of our political system when you've had so many people saying that we've had all this billions of dollars of extra funding and what have you, and there's someone's life truncated, sad to say. I mean, I don't want to add to his misery by saying I feel sorry for him, but it was totally unnecessary. He gets told to come in September. That is, September he gets referred. He doesn't get referral to February, and 10 months later from the first referral, he gets an operation. He should have had that operation in the first 2 weeks from start to finish.
6 weeks was the measure.
That was the outside limit that was being promised to people. But here's the point here. When you look at that 25% and that prognosis, you don't know how many are the bad prognosis because that's the bad record or ratio of this complaint, or is it because 15% of them have been delayed? That's tragic. And here's the point here. Every district health board, 13 district health boards are massively underfunded.
And can I interrupt and point out that the DHB, Southern DHB, had such a problem with deficit that the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, who we asked to appear on Checkpoint tonight, and he wasn't available to come on, sacked the board and appointed his own commissioner with the view of driving the deficit down. Now, I asked Nigel Miller this evening, was the deficit problematic? And he said, no, he doesn't believe it's directly responsible, although it is difficult to operate under a deficit. This brings us to more money for Vote Health.
There's no doubt about it. Look, we're probably $1.7 billion down on what we need minimum. That's the reality of it all. And if you compare us with other first world nations and the ratio of expenditure per person, that's what the government never says. They just say, we're spending these billions. They don't say what per person. Now, the sad thing is, look, I listened to that doctor, what's his name, Nigel Miller, and I felt damn sad for him as well. Really, I felt sad for him because he's a professional who is on there trying to explain away while someone has got a abbreviated, shortened life who didn't have to have it that way.
Do you believe your party is disproportionately likely, more than any other party, to have elderly supporters?
Yes.
Okay, great. Couldn't you do more for them by letting National have its way with superannuation going to 60 over an incredibly long term, rather than making a line in the sand that it remains at 65, and better target problems in the healthcare that elderly people are receiving?
Well, yes, but their target is to the year 2040. I don't think it's going to help anybody right now. It needs to get into a district health board and get serious attention right now. And on the question of targeting older people or helping older people, if we had three free doctor's visits a year for gold card carriers, for example, and only one goes to hospital of 100 who didn't have to, only one didn't go to hospital because of this, because they got the doctor early enough, then it'll be fiscally neutral. If 2 out of 100 don't go to hospital, that's the cost of hospitalisation, we'll be seriously saving money.
But I see the point you're making, and you're making points around the fiscals, that in other words, people who can't afford to go to their GP go to outpatients instead, right?
Too late, yeah.
Which clogs up hospitals, and then if they wait too long, then they're... But he went to his GP and was referred to the hospital, and the hospital sent him packing. As you say, they didn't give him surgery for 10 months. The problem is at the surgical end, isn't it?
Roll it back a bit. The problem is they don't realise that investment in people's health is actually an investment. It's not a cost. If you were running a cattle farm, I don't want to use this analogy, but if you're running a cattle farm, you would see this as your capital, your asset capital, and you'd look after it. But we're not looking after people. He goes from being independent of the state to dependent, and a miserable existence, and his family going down with him. This is all avoidable. That's my point. But I can remember the arguments we've had, and I don't want to attack any particular minister now because they've been going on for some time. But I can remember when that district health board got dealt to and they were characterised as being incompetent and inept. They just didn't have the money. My district health board up north is way short. They're not even putting an annualised report because they don't want to report that they're so short of money.
Are you going to hold Northland?
Yes, I am. If the people up there want to sheet home the change of 2015, where for the first time a province neglected for decades got remembered, then I'm going to bag it home easily on
Doesn't that
Saturday.
speak to the point that I was making earlier, that a by-election is a classic opportunity to make a statement against the government? And it's brilliant to vote for an opposition party then.
And it is in government as well, because I'll tell you something, up north there, if I want to give you an example, we've got a pipeline problem. The only replacement right now in these days of waiting would be a train line all the way to Marsden Point, and we haven't got one.
Yeah.
Doesn't that spell out the message here?
Yeah. Okay, let's say you've got the National Party, people in the National Party potentially defaming you, trying to shaft you, leaking information against you.
Well, it's just some of them.
Yeah, some of them. I just want to talk about the phone calls that you or somebody from New Zealand First, who we all know will be you, is potentially going to receive, all going well for you, after election night. What are the non-negotiables for you? For example, the referendum on Māori seats. Is that a non-negotiable?
Well, look, it's a referendum.
A midterm. It's not. It's a midterm referendum.
No. We'll add it to other referenda. But let me say this here.
It's not a midterm referendum anymore.
Well, you can make it at the end of the term if you like.
So you're making it. It's not me.
Well, you've got to look at the practicalities of it all.
Oh,
if you
hold
want
on
to save costs.
No. You said it was midterm. Is it not midterm now? I'm prepared to accept that.
No, I believe it should be at midterm. But if we're going to have a big argument about it, and they say, well, can you delay it?
So you're resigning from midterm. It could be next election.
If you can delay it, if they say, look, there's good reason to delay it 18 months, and here comes the question of cost, then we might say agree on that. But it's a referendum.
You just did that then, didn't you? You just moved back from that position.
I didn't move back from it. I just said to you, we go into a situation. Now, if you go in, like North Korea dealing with South Korea, all you get is nuclear war. You've got to go in and prepare to say compromise, but you go in to get as much as you possibly can.
So that's not a non-negotiable. As long as...
I never said any of these things are non-negotiable. I'm saying, and look, in the interest of Māori, where house ownership has declined by 25% by 38% in the last 25 years, what's going wrong with our political representation? Face the facts. The vast majority of Māori who are entitled to go on the Māori roll because they're qualified to are on the general roll. So if you want to stand by and delay change in history, You know, here, the civil rights movement in the United States, the reason why they end up with a black president is they try to smash down the doors of discrimination into the best of what America have. Here we got Maori trying to set up separatism.
Okay.
And that's why I think
so you're prepared. You're prepared to say it doesn't have to be midterm. It can be after 3 years. That's a development.
Well, maybe, yes.
That's a development on your position. Okay. Superannuation at 65.
You all know that I'm the most reasonable man, but I'm adamant on principle.
I've never ever heard you described as the most reasonable man by anyone ever.
Already.
Do you really think you're reasonable?
I'm a very reasonable person. Really? But I don't sell myself out or my principles out. That's the reason why I left 2 cabinets. 2 cabinets.
Yes.
2 cabinets because I would not accept
Minister of
what they were
Māori
doing.
Affairs under Jim Bolger, are you looking back on that and saying, I was blowing the whistle against what was taking place in that first term?
I was.
Okay, thank you.
Can we talk? I was.
Can we talk about...
He went from the biggest majority who hung Parliament in 3 years flat.
Yeah.
I got a bit of evidence backing up that I was right, right?
Yeah, the Decent Society, they campaigned on 1990. Labor had spontaneously combusted.
That's right.
In 1993,
mother of all budget
they squeaked home. They squeaked home.
No, that is squeaked home by asking Peter Tapsell to be the Speaker. He was a Labor member.
Okay.
Otherwise, it was...
Sorry, it was my fault I raised this, but there's so many things I want to ask you.
The first call that came in on 1993, election night 1993, the first call I got was from Jim Bolger. I've got 2 MPs, I should have had 3,
right.
But he's calling me.
65. Labor is saying 65, National is saying 67. Is that a non-negotiable for you? Because you were saying to your party, it's 65, full stop, superannuation.
Look, what I'm trying to say to you is this. If it's the question of affordability, which they all argue, then how come these old parties and all these people who are too gutless to speak up on immigration allowed 87,000 in the last 15 years to come in here and get full super after just 10 years?
Right. Answer the question.
Yes.
Is it a non-negotiable? 65, is it a non-negotiable? Because if it's a non-negotiable, you can't work with the Nats, can you?
The National Party is trying to govern like Labor for the next 3 years. Their policy rates are 2040. It's not relevant now.
So you're prepared to accept that policy? You're prepared to live with that
no,
policy?
I'm not. Well, they're not going to be moving it to 97 in the next 3 years.
You know, you were reminding me of Nadia Comaneci. You're sounding so flexible tonight. I mean, this is 5 days out from the election, and
see, such an old analogy. I can't bear that you're using alongside me.
Right. What do you stand for most of all?
The age is staying at 65.
3 minutes.
What do I stand for?
Yeah, most of all.
I stand for, most of all, a dramatic economic and social change to that which we've had the last 33 years.
Meaningfully.
Well, the last 33 years we had a neoliberal experiment that's just gone so wrong.
No, don't look back. Look forward. Meaningfully, through policy.
I want to correct what's wrong, because you cannot go forward unless you fix up what's wrong. Now, the second thing about it is, you said meaningful food policy?
No, through policy. Meaningful, through policy.
Yeah, through policy.
What is the policy you're going to say to Jacinda Ardern or Bill English? I must have this. What is it?
You'll go glazed-eyed, but if you want to grow real wealth in this country, which is dependent upon exports, change the Reserve Bank Act to reflect that we're an export-dependent economy. Then you'll get all sorts of people growing the wealth of this country, not exporting, declining, which it is. And we're getting deeper and deeper into debt. And we haven't paid our way for a long time. I want to change the tax policy to do with exports. I want to change the tax policy to do with business people. So we become a country rather like, for example, Singapore, or, for example, Taiwan, or Ireland.
Singapore, we get fined for dropping litter.
Well, I didn't talk about social policy. I'm talking about economic policy.
Okay, economic policy.
You're being rather particular.
Yes,
now.
I am. No, but
you've
you've got to be particular with it, because otherwise, 2 minutes later, you'll tell me 3 market gardeners told you.
No, but I've seen tremendous progress made by people who know that if you take assets and add value to them, that's where great wealth is.
And how do you do that?
Well, you make sure that your log's not going offshore in the most raw state.
Yeah, but how do you do that as a government?
Well, you have a New Zealand log price.
Hold on a sec. This is private enterprise. The logs are going offshore because...
right there you put it, your hand on it. You said this is private enterprise. No, it's not. 10 of our top 10 forestry companies, 8 are foreign-owned. Right. They're not running the economy for New Zealand anymore.
So
we're running it for overseas.
What do you do with them to make them add value and employ people in New Zealand?
As we told them 2 weeks ago in a big conference of forestry interests, which New Zealand first called in Whangarei, gentlemen and ladies, we want these logs added value in our country first. We want to keep our businesses that are dependent upon logs open first. We're going to be like Canada. You're not going to put these logs offshore until our people need wood can get it at an affordable price.
Okay, who do you think will be the next Prime Minister of New Zealand? We've got 50 seconds.
I have no idea who the next Prime Minister will be for next New Zealand, of New Zealand. All I can say that some of the aspirants will not be.
That was a crap answer. Who would you prefer? Who would you prefer?
Look, if you go into negotiations preferring anyone, you're leaving your team behind. You're not giving your country a chance. You're putting your personal bias out there. And at the end of the day, you might not think this, but in the end, it's a bitter pill you've got to swallow here.
And that means you are much more pragmatic and flexible than you have been letting on prior to this moment, right? And you've got 17 seconds.
Well, let me just tell you, I'm very proud to have come in here and finally been properly analysed by someone who wouldn't know.
Oh, stop it. No, stop it. Cheap shot. Answer the question. You're prepared to do deals. It's 6 o'clock.
Well, you've always got to be prepared to do deals, but in the national interest, not your own. Got it? Thank you very much. Wonderful. Lovely talking to you.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. I'm Paul Brennan. Tankers are bringing in petrol and diesel to Auckland from Marsden Point in Mount Maunganui with the help of the Defence Force after a ruptured pipeline disrupted the city's main supply. The Marsden Point pipeline to Whitty was shot down last week after being damaged by a digger. A fuel industry spokesperson, Andrew McNaught, says it's unprecedented and the Auckland region only plans for a maximum 6 days of reserves.
This is a significant supply disruption that we haven't seen in 32 years. It's unprecedented. The system is built to be able to take small disruptions, but it's not built to take significant ones.
Andrew McNaught says the pipeline is Auckland's only supply of jet fuel and its main supplier of petrol and diesel. Up to 20 Defence Force drivers will help bring in tankers of fuel to petrol stations. Refining New Zealand, which owns the Marsden Point pipeline, says the supply of jet fuel to Auckland Airport won't start again for at least 9 days. The top doctor at the Southern District Health Board says he's prepared to resign over major delays which have affected prostate patients' care at Dunedin Hospital. A Dunedin man, Stephen Hoffman, told Checkpoint he waited 10 months for treatment for his prostate cancer after being referred to the hospital by his GP. The cancer has now spread and he's undergoing daily radiotherapy. The DHB's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Nigel Miller, says Mr Hoffman is one of at least 6 men who have faced significant treatment delays, and that's unacceptable.
From my perspective, I would resign if I thought it was going to make a difference. If I resign, is this going to make things work better and faster and help sort out this type of problem? That's the best I can say, really, John. This really saddens me and makes me feel sick.
Nigel Miller says a review is underway of the treatment prostate cancer patients have received at Dunedin Hospital. A rally by farmers in Morrinsville today left the Labour Party in no doubt that rural people are not happy with their policies on water tax and bringing agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. About 500 farmers and people reliant on farming turned out to show their support. The rally was billed as non-political, but one of the organisers, dairy farmer Lloyd Downing, didn't dispute Labour was the target.
Because there's probably going to be a Labour-Greens alliance, isn't it? And I mean, if we try and farm underneath that sort of politics is going to be extremely difficult.
Lloyd Downing says the message to politicians is let farmers sort out their own problems. Meanwhile, the latest advance voting numbers are out, showing nearly 500,000 people have already voted in the general election. Yesterday, about a quarter of the advance voting booths were open in shopping malls, libraries and supermarkets, and almost 46,000 people voted. It's the first year advance booths have been open on a Sunday. So far, 445,000 people have voted early for the election on Saturday. In 2014, nearly 718,000 people voted early. The man who orchestrated a fatal kidnapping of a middle-aged woman once referred to her as Mum. Seng Le Yu was one of 6 men jailed today over the kidnapping and manslaughter of 50-year-old Jandarat Prutsiriporn. Edward Gay reports.
Liu and Miss Prutsiriporn fell out after they were both arrested for possession of methamphetamine. Justice Palmer said Liu, with the help of his friends Apishat Kohomklang and Sodarith Sao, took part in the kidnapping. They also employed muscle from the headhunters gang. Miss Prutsiriporn was held for 19 hours without food or water and spent most of it in the boot of various cars. She eventually used a chef's steel to break the boot open and fell from a moving car. Miss Prutsiriporn died of head injuries 2 days later. I Tamaki Makoto ko Edward Gay aho.
A man who worked as a psychiatrist using false qualifications has been sentenced to more than 4 years imprisonment. Mohammed Siddiqui worked for the Waikato District Health Board at its Henry Rongamo Bennett Centre in 2015. Siddiqui pleaded guilty in the Hamilton District Court to 4 charges in March this year. In sentencing today, Judge Glenn Marshall said Siddiqui caused harm to vulnerable victims and their whānau. to the DHB's reputation and to the US-based doctor he impersonated. He will face deportation to India when he is released. Sandbags are being given out in Mosgiel near Dunedin as residents deal with flooding from a day of steady rain. The rain has closed half a dozen rural roads and East Tairi School. The Dunedin City Council says some sports fields and reserves have minor flooding, but its infrastructure coped well and key stormwater screens are being checked. The council says the rain is expected to ease, though another 15 to 20 millimetres of rain is forecast until 8 o'clock this evening. Motorists are being asked to drive carefully. 2 months ago, the Tairi Plain suffered its second largest flood on record. And the South Island's Lewis Pass has just reopened after being blocked by snow this afternoon. Lewis Pass is now part of the South Island's main traffic corridor after last November's 7.8 magnitude Kaikoura earthquake devastated State Highway 1. Just after 5 minutes past 6. To sport now, the former world golf #1 Lydia Ko is banking on a late season form surge to boost her back up the world golf rankings. Ko, who's yet to win a tournament this year, has slipped to 8th in the world. However, today she finished 3rd in the final major of the year, the Evian Championship in France, and also finished runner-up in the LPGA event prior to that. Those two performances have earned Lydia Ko $500,000 in prize money, and she's now on her way to Auckland for next week's New Zealand Women's Open.
Be able to play in front of the home crowd and see my friends. I think it's going to be a super week, and just to have the best golfers, best female golfers in our backyard.
Lydia Ko there. The New Zealand motor racing driver Scott Dixon has had to settle for 3rd in the IndyCar Championship after finishing 4th in the final race of the season in California. American Joseph Newgarden finished 2nd to win the championship, with Frenchman Simon Pagenaud winning the Sonoma race and finishing 2nd overall. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, celebrating the 50th birthday of Wellington's Unity Books with manager and co-owner Tiddy Lloyd. I wonder if she's still trying to grow truffles. The Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra goes techno, and Massey University's Dr. Michael Phillip debuts as our latest after-dinner scientist on the subject of psychology, although we have had him on before discussing the benefits of cussing on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air, and you can watch our RNZ Election 17 coverage this Saturday night on television. John Campbell and Guy and Espiner present Election 17 with full TV production from 7 o'clock on Freeview Channel 50 and Face TV, which is Sky Channel 83. Now to the short forecast from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Tuesday. Northland to Horowhenua, that includes the Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy and thundery with hail, clearing in the morning tomorrow. However, isolated thunderstorms and hail return south of Auckland for a time tomorrow afternoon and evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers, possibly thundery with hail in Hawke's Bay, turning to rain in Gisborne tomorrow. Kapiti, Wellington and Waitemata, long fine spells and a few showers. Nelson and Marlborough away from Kaikoura coast. The rain should clear up this evening. A few showers tomorrow, possible thunderstorms and hail in the afternoon. Kaikoura coast, Canterbury, North Otago, Dunedin and Clutha. Rain with heavy falls about the ranges, easing in Otago before the end of today and elsewhere tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers for the rest of today. Fine tomorrow. Central Otago and Southland, patchy rain or drizzle. That should clear up tonight. Morning low cloud or fog tomorrow, then fine. And at the Chatham Islands, periods of rain. It's exactly 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Paul. We're returning now to Dunedin, where the Southern DHB has admitted on Checkpoint tonight that treatment delays have resulted in the lives of more than 6 urology patients being shortened. Prostate cancer patient Stephen Hoffman says he's now incontinent and has cancer which has spread to his rectum due to waiting 10 months for urgent surgery. But whilst the Chief Medical Officer of Health at the Southern DHB, Dr Nigel Miller, has apologised, he says he won't be resigning. Zach Fleming explains.
Diagnosis: enlarged hardened prostate, suspected cancer, urgent referral needed. But it took 5.5 months until Stephen Hoffman even saw a specialist.
I should have been seen within 2 months, and I should have been back at work before I even seen the first specialist.
Yes, once again, your patient notes, his referral was graded as a 3 with a wait time of 6 weeks. In the end, you waited 10 months for surgery.
Yep. And that's basically, if I'd have seen them straight away when I should have been and had the operation within 2 months, that means that it wouldn't have been sitting there in me for another 8 months to turn into a ruddy great tumour and basically shorten my life.
Forgive me for asking what is a pretty blunt question, but what's your prognosis, Steve?
5 years came up in amongst the conversation.
5 years left to live. The 62-year-old says he's completely incontinent because the tumour has spread. He's staring down 6.5 weeks of daily radiation therapy.
Quite confident I would have been able to go back to work. I wouldn't have near the amount of problems I'm having with incontinence and all that, because as it happened, I had a catheter put in me that day, and I worked up until the day before my operation, 19 weeks with a catheter in me. And that wasn't pleasant.
No.
Yeah. So,
have you received an apology?
No, I haven't.
But an apology finally came this afternoon. Here's the Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Nigel Miller, speaking to John Campbell.
I believe his care has been unreasonably delayed in our system, which I think is, really poor and something we deeply regret.
Dr. Miller confirmed Stephen Hoffman's life has been shortened as a result of the treatment delays. And this comes just a month after a damning external review of the Southern DHB's Urology department found there's a significant level of clinical risk with delays. And Mr. Hoffman's not the only one.
I'm concerned that there has been significant delays for patients. So at the moment, the first action has to be to go through all the cases and...
When you say all the cases, how many are you talking about? More than 6?
I'm talking about all the people currently in the process of going through assessment, treatment, surgery, etc., which is what has been happening, which the hospital team have been sitting down with the clinicians and going through them to find out who else could be suffering significant delays and what needs to be done to speed up treatment and assessment for patients.
Do you think there are more than 6 patients? Because that's the number we were looking at who had what seemed on the face of it to be really problematic delays. Do you think it is that number, more? What are we talking about?
I think it's very likely there's more.
More than 6?
That's why I feel so, disappointed that we find ourselves in this situation.
More than 6 men who have suffered such delays to their prostate cancer treatment that their life expectancy may be imperiled as a result of it.
There may well be. I can't give you a definite figure, but that's my fear.
Dr. Miller says as the Chief Medical Officer, the buck stops with him. He's ultimately responsible, but he won't be resigning.
I would resign if I thought it was going to make a difference. If I resign, is this going to make things work better and faster and help sort out this type of problem? That's the best I can say, really, John. This really saddens me and makes me feel sick that I am part of the care of a man who's ended up in this situation.
Health Minister Jonathan Coleman declined to be interviewed, but in a statement passed on his sympathies to Mr. Hoffman and said his case illustrates why the Urology department at Southern DHB needs to change the way it operates. David Clark, Labour's health spokesperson, says DHBs need more funding.
We're seeing the human cost of a focus on deficits, on a hospital running on a knife edge. We need to make sure it's properly funded so people are getting the health care that they deserve and need. And there needs to be some accountability around this.
Stephen has applied to ACC now that the Southern DHB has accepted responsibility and acknowledged it's made mistakes. But he's again being told to wait. It'll be 3 to 4 months before he has a decision. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
So much feedback coming in on this. We really appreciate it. We are going to keep looking at it. Thank you. The Prime Minister says the government will take another look at options to make sure a fuel shortage that's grounded hundreds of flights at Auckland Airport doesn't happen again. Thousands of air travellers are facing delays after a digger struck the only pipeline carrying jet fuel from Marsden Point in Northland to the airport. Opposition parties have pounced on the shortage on the campaign trail today, saying the government was warned about the potential risk years ago but chose to ignore it. Anusha Bradley reports.
In 2012, Air New Zealand urged the government to help establish a new fuel storage terminal in West Auckland and turn the Widdy terminal near the airport into a dedicated jet fuel storage site. In a cabinet paper that same year, The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment agreed a new terminal would improve the resilience of Auckland's fuel supply chain, but the government decided the $57 million cost of setting one up was too expensive. On the campaign trail in Whanganui today, Labour leader Jacinda Ardern said air travellers are now paying the price for that decision.
It does look like that infrastructure was critical and needed, and certainly we're seeing the upshot of that infrastructure not existing. We need to make sure that we're resilient. We need to make sure we've got backup plans when issues like this arise. The fact that one digger can cause our international travel to be ground to a halt shows how vulnerable that infrastructure was, and the National Government ignored that.
The former Labour government was aware of the risks too. A 2005 report commissioned by the then Ministry for Economic Development identifies the single pipe from Marsden Point to Auckland as an issue. In Napier, the Prime Minister Bill English says the government will take another look at the advice.
Well, I'm sure they're going to go back and look hard at it. There's been a couple of studies done that looked at different alternatives for backing up the current infrastructure, and the decisions were made that the investment that would be required to double up would be too much and be passed on to consumers. But I'd expect that after this, they'll go back and have another look at it.
The Greens leader, James Shaw, says the government's failure to provide critical infrastructure is negligent.
Even though it's private, it's a private company and so on, I think that the government does have a hand in ensuring that critical infrastructure is protected and that the risks are managed. And so I would say that if they chose not to do that on the basis that it was a purely private venture, then they were being negligent.
Up to 80,000 litres, or about 2 tanker loads of jet fuel, was spilled when the pipeline ruptured near Ruakaka on Thursday, but Refining NZ says most of it's been cleaned up and the contaminated soil removed. James Shaw says the Northern Regional Council and Refining NZ must prove there's been no environmental damage. New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says the crisis shows the importance of a railway line between Marsden Point and Auckland, and he's dismissing Bill English's suggestions that a second fuel pipeline or more storage might be needed.
The second pipeline will be the silliest idea I've ever heard. In fact, you can build a whole railway line for that, and that's what I'm saying. And as for storage, in these days of terrorism, the more storage you got near the airport, the more dangerous things would be.
Refining NZ says repairs are being hampered by highly explosive fuel and vapour in the pipeline, and the earliest any jet fuel will be arriving in Auckland Airport via the pipeline will be Wednesday next week. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
6:17. He once called her mum, but today Seng Lek Liu was jailed for orchestrating the kidnapping of Jindara Prutsiriporn, a kidnapping that turned fatal after she fell bound and gagged from the boot of a moving car. Liu was one of 6 men sentenced today to jail terms ranging from 6 to 12 years for his part in the kidnapping and manslaughter of the 50-year-old. Edward Gay was at the sentencing at the High Court in Auckland.
Seng Lek Liu had been close to Jindara Prutsiriporn. The pair were even arrested together for methamphetamine possession. Justice Palmer said it was at that point their relationship broke down.
Abusive, suspicious text messages between them and others involving allegations of theft and blackmail illustrate that graphically.
Liu then set about planning her kidnapping and asked his friends Sodarith Sao and Apishat Kohomklang for help. They were sentenced today to 9 years and 8 months and 10 years and 8 months respectively. Liu also sought the services of Headhunters gang associates known as the Ghost Unit. After a botched kidnap attempt in February last year, the Ghost Unit, at least 10 strong, returned a couple of weeks later. This time she was lured from her home on the pretense of a drug deal, but the Ghost Unit were waiting outside. They threatened to shoot Miss Prutsiriporn and harm her family before bundling her into a car.
We don't know exactly how Ms. Prutsiriporn spent the next 19 hours. We do not know that she was subjected to violence, but she must have been in dire fear for her life.
Miss Prutsiriporn was bundled into the boot of another car and moved around, while 2 other members of the Ghost Unit drove into town with her EFTPOS card to clean out her bank account.
By approximately 5 a.m. on the 1st of March 2016, Mr. Vaifale and Mr. Haurua had custody of Ms. Prutsiriporn. Mr. Haurua sent some offensively callous texts about having done a snatch and having an idiot in the boot.
She was held without food or water before Sal was left in charge. About 3 hours later, he heard banging noises coming from the boot and drove off to muffle the sounds.
In the car boot, Ms Prutsiriporn had found a knife which she stuck down her trousers. She also found a chef's steel. We don't know exactly what she did, but she did something to try to escape from the boot because of the fear of violence the offenders put on her.
As Sal's car approached traffic lights on Huia Road in Papatoetoe, the boot flew open.
The boot came open, and Ms Prutsiriporn, still bound, came out of it. Her head hit the road with a crunch, fracturing her skull. The chef's steel was by her hand.
She died 2 days later in hospital. Justice Palmer said some of the accused had downplayed their involvement and failed to see how serious their crimes were.
But other New Zealanders will see this as drug dealers contracting with a gang to kidnap a small middle-aged woman under threat to her and her family, and keeping her in conditions that caused her such fear that she attempted to escape, bound from the boot of a moving car, which caused her death. This is completely unacceptable.
The judge said because of that, he would impose a 50% minimum non-parole period. Ghost Unit member Luigi Havia was sentenced to 10 years and 3 months in prison. Tawhito Vaifale was sentenced to 7 years and 10 months, and Joseph Haurua was sentenced to 6.5 years. Outside court, Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers said as well as the 6 sentenced today, 5 others involved had pleaded guilty and were sentenced before trial.
This horrific case shows us exactly what the headhunters motorcycle gangs stand for and the damage they are doing to our communities. We know they are distributing large amounts or large quantities of drugs through our communities, and the ripple effect that this has is dangerous and sometimes deadly.
Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gayahau.
21 past 6, a memorial plaque dedicated to a man who was killed by a foreign driver on the wrong side of the road is under threat after complaints by local councillors. Dunedin photographer Riley Baker was killed last August when a car driven by Chinese national Lemon Ma crossed the centre line, crashing into Mr. Baker's motorcycle. His family gathered in January at Shag Point on State Highway 1 near the accident site to unveil a bench sheet and a plaque containing Mr. Baker's ashes. His sister Sarah told me she consulted with all relevant authorities seeking their permission and sign-off, but has now heard some local councillors aren't happy and it may have to go.
I started with my local council just because I wasn't sure who owned the land or who was in charge of it, and they pointed me in the direction of NZTA and said that NZTA look after that rest stop. So then I just made a general inquiry with NZTA, who put me through to the Dunedin branch, who then put me through to Downers, who are contracted to look after that area, and dealt with them.
So Downer emailed you back and said, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, they gave me the go-ahead. So we proceeded the work quite quickly just because I wanted to unveil it on Riley's birthday, which was the 13th of January. So we did it over the Christmas, New Year's holidays and got it ready for then and unveiled it with friends and family and a few members of the public. We had a policeman present and it was a really nice day.
Oh, I bet it was a pretty special experience. It's a beautiful view there at Shag Point, isn't it, looking out to sea?
Yeah, it is really beautiful. And now there's a chair there, you know, all members of public and tourists and everyone can sit there and enjoy that view.
And so what happened? You have now received an email from Downer saying, we made a mistake.
Yeah. So out of the blue on Friday, I received an email saying, sorry, I made a mistake. We're going to have to remove it and we'll give it back to you. But we don't want it removed. We don't, and we actually put some of his ashes on top of the where the headstone is and into the concrete and stuff, and they'd have to smash that to get it out. And I don't know, it all just seems so horrible, and it wasn't our mistake.
No, it most certainly wasn't. And the person who wrote you the email is very explicit about that. I replied to your email giving the go-ahead for these changes without fully understanding the scope and the implications that this would have. For this, I fully and wholeheartedly apologise for any confusion and distress this mistake will cause. So Downer's owning the mistake. It's their mistake. They're saying sorry, but they're also saying, look, members of the public are a little bit uncomfortable, I think probably about Riley's ashes being there, aren't they?
Well, nobody actually knew they were there, apart from obviously the people that were there that day. You can't tell that they were there. That's only kind of come out publicly, obviously, in the last couple of days. Yeah, no one would ever have known that they were there, apart from, you know, the close friends and family that were there that day. But I also found it quite unusual. I contacted our local council, who are also named as being complainants, and they have no knowledge of these complaints. They don't understand and feel it's a bit unfair that they're being named as a complainant because they don't think that it is them. The Mayor, Gary Kircher, is looking into it currently as now that workdays have resumed, but so far his response is he's pretty sure that there are no complaints from local council.
Okay, so this seems to be an issue from Downer. What are you going to do, Sarah?
Well, I responded to the email asking if they can put a hold on any work until we can have a chat, and I don't know, I'm hoping we can find some resolution, whether we can put some plantings around it to protect it more, or whether I take on some kind of financial responsibility to maintain it if that's the issue. You know, it's been over a year since Riley's death now. We just want to be left in peace and let him rest in peace. You know, it's quite a grieving process after you lose someone like that, and we thought we'd finally come to a time where we could put all this stuff behind us and move on and make new happy memories, and that was a place that we had been doing that, and so all this is just so upsetting.
Sarah Baker, and in a statement, the Transport Agency says while it did indeed give permission for Riley's family to install a seat to look out to the ocean, it did not give permission for the installation of a headstone containing his ashes behind the seat on public property. The agency acknowledges this was not clearly communicated to Riley's family at the time of installation and says it now is committed to working with them to find a resolution to this unfortunate situation. It's 6:26. The dystopian TV series The Handmaid's Tale, brilliant, although don't watch it with the kids around, has been crowned Best TV Drama at the Emmy Awards and also won Best Drama Writing and Directing, and earned Elizabeth Moss a well-deserved Best Actress statuette and endowed a Best Drama Supporting Actress award. Veep and Saturday Night Live also big winners at the event in LA just a few hours ago. CNN's David Daniel reports.
The dark future's always brighter on TV. Let's go!
After the requisite opening musical number, Emmy's host Stephen Colbert moved on to a mainstay of his own show, Zingers aimed at President Trump.
Because unlike the presidency, Emmys go to the winner of the popular vote.
Trump may not have won an Emmy, but Alec Baldwin did for playing him on Saturday Night Live.
At long last, Mr. President, here is your Emmy.
The 2017 winners were more diverse than in years past. Donald Glover won for directing and acting in Atlanta. Riz Ahmed won for The Night Of, and Lena Waithe of Master of None became the first African-American woman to win for comedy series writing.
Thank you for embracing a little Indian boy from South Carolina and a little queer black girl from the south side of Chicago.
Stories about women ruled the night. Julia Louis-Dreyfus received her 6th Emmy for Veep. No actor has ever won that many for a single role. The Handmaid's Tale earned 5 Emmys, including Best Drama Series, and Nicole Kidman received her first Emmy, one of 5 on the night for Best Limited Series winner, Big Little Lies.
This is a friendship that then created opportunities. It created opportunities out of a frustration because we weren't getting offered great roles. So now, more great roles for women, please. Yeah.
That report from CNN, I don't think we cut her off for any particular reason. I think she'd actually finished. 6:28. Just before we go tonight, so much feedback. Thank you so much. We are going to keep on that Southern DHB story. To the situation regarding SaveMart, which we worked on at length last week. All of that stuff is online. We've really been looking hard at what's going on there. The stories we've been covering for the past week about staff being concerned about their health and safety and not being able to wear gloves when sorting hazardous items. WorkSafe has visited the Newlands store, and since then, owner Tom Doonan has begun the process of making what looks like the union members redundant. SaveMart collects clothing from the blue child cancer bins. We went to them last week because we wanted to know what they thought about the situation. That's child cancer. SaveMart collect the clothes, sell them and give some of the proceeds to child cancer. Its chief executive, Robin Kittle, got back to us today. She said child cancer receives about $175,000 a year from Mr Doonan in 31 SaveMart stores. She says, and I quote, "We do have concerns about the recent allegations and have discussed the situation with SaveMart. SaveMart will be providing us with a report addressing these allegations once all relevant information is available. We expect to meet with SaveMart and discuss the report within the month. We will then be able to determine next steps." That statement to us from Robin Kittle, the CEO of Child Cancer. We will, in fact, keep looking at that story, and we have some more information to share over the next couple of nights. Jacinda Ardern tomorrow night, as well as the rest of the big old diet that is part of Checkpoint every night here on RNZ National from 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tankers are bringing in petrol and diesel to Auckland from Marsden Point and Mount Maunganui with the help of the Defence Force after a pipeline ruptured. The top doctor at the Southern DHB says he's prepared to resign over major delays in prostate care if it would do any good. A rally by farmers in Morrinsville has left Labor in no doubt that rural people are not happy with its policies, and sandbags are being given out in Mosgiel as residents deal with flooding from a day of steady rain. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Like staying up to date with the news? Then tune into News Show Forecast, the show where I, Rhys Matthewson, and 3 of my comedian friends predict the news. That's right, we'll guesstimate our way through the week ahead. We've got a hunch that we just need to scratch. Forecast. Get the news before it breaks.
The fun starts tomorrow night in Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.